Now boarding our first class Ultra Gold passengers. Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the podcast that takes you on an extraordinary journey through the lives of others, where empathy knows no bounds. Your host, Neil Matthews, is absolutely thrilled that you're here. Please take your seat as we're about to take flight into season 16. Be sure to hold on tight, because Take Flight isn't just about the skies above. It's about the depths within. We'll dive headfirst into the stories of those who faced turbulence and yet found the strength to rise above it all. So grab your headphones and get ready to soar with us as we launch into season 16. Thank you for flying with us. Buckle up and let's take flight.
That is right. Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the cockpit zone. Welcome. I hope you have your tray table and your beverage in the upright position. Maybe the beverage, because, if you dump it over, it might spill. So be careful. I don't know. Are you on an aisle seat today? Are you in the window seat, or are you stuck maybe in the middle? Who knows? I'll tell you this. When I fly, and I have flown a few times or two, I love to drink tomato juice while I fly. We jumped on the plane today from Medford, Oregon, and we flew our way all the way out here to the great metropolis of Pennsylvania. Who knows? Punxsutawney Phil may be hanging out with us today. He may stop by to see if his shadow is truly there or not there. But help me welcome in my new friend, Todd. Todd, how are you today?
Good. I'm doing very good. Thanks for having me on.
So, Todd, how far are you from the groundhog area? Do you know?
I am about 3 hours. It's right around there. Yes, you're right on point. Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. That's where the groundhog is. Punxsutawney Phil. It's very big here in the state of Pennsylvania.
I've always wanted to go there. My friends today were actually watching Groundhog's Day, and I just thought, talking to a guy from Pennsylvania, how funny is that? Now, if your name had been Phil, that would have been funnier. So have you ever been to that festival where they pull him out of the ground?
I actually have not. It's on my bucket list of things to do. Should get out there as somebody that grew up and lives in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. I should probably add that to my bucket list.
Yeah, I would think the Liberty Bell be on there and Punxsutawney Phil. So help us with this. We love to lead off every show with this question. Now, I know you've been interviewed by a number of folks, and you will continue to get interviewed by a number of folks. I just have imagination on this, and I'm putting that out there, especially once this amazing book comes out. Before we get to that, you got to help me answer this question, because I bet nobody's going to ask you this, and here it is what size shoes do you wear, Todd?
I wear 10.5.
And nobody's asked you that just yet. We're the only ones?
Yes, you are the only ones who asked what shoes I wear.
I just was checking, because if somebody's stealing our shtick, I want to know. So help us with this, because for sponsorship, we're always trying to covet some sponsor dollars with shoe companies. So can you help us with a brand or a style that you love with those 10.5?
I'm very off-brand when it comes to casual shoes. I'm very particular in my running shoes and athletic wears. I am a sucker for Brooks running shoes. They're definitely more on the expensive side. I do have some issues with my feet. I've had some feet issues. So when it comes to athletic wear and running shoes, I don't shy away from spending money. We'll just say that. I would much rather spend money on running shoes than casual shoes.
Well, that's funny, because back in our season 15, back in the third part of October, we were actually introduced to a guy that said he will only wear Brooks. Taking his lead, went out and bought the Brooks series Ghost, and I guess it's the iteration 15. So I just thought that was kind of poetic that we were in season 15. I have this pair of shoes that are Brooks in 15s. Now, they're not size 15. They're size 11, so you could probably get into them a little better. That was kind of cool. I was like, wow, I have Brooks too. And used to be an avid runner, and then the podcast sort of sucked all that time away. I still miss running. I only have one pair of Brooks. Should I invest in more, in your opinion?
Yes, I would have those exact shoes. Brooks Ghost 15s. But yes, I strictly use Brooks as well. It's funny you mentioned that.
Used to be an Asics guy, so I'm trying to figure out, do I jump ship and go towards the Brooks? So we'll see. So help us with this. We're in this season. We're flying all over the place. We're trying to take flight. We're trying not to be grounded any longer. But when you heard us talking about this idea of of taking flight and this idea of kind of soaring to new heights, what did that invoke in you?
It invoked people being able to share their success stories, what they have had to overcome in their life. I'm a firm believer, and it's the truth. Everybody has a story to tell. Some are tragic, some are sad, traumatic. I just think that taking flight, it's how did you come out of that? How did you overcome that? How did you become this overcomer?
I really loved it. I mean, the idea of flying to me has always fascinated me. I'm not a big flyer, as I don't love to fly. I don't love the takeoff. I don't love sitting in the jet. I don't even really love the landing. I love the getting off. Well, sort of, because it's always crowded, so maybe not even the getting off. I love it when I get to the destination. That's fun. I don't love all the other stuff that comes with it. My wife is a great reminder of this for me. She says, sometimes you have to enjoy the journey, not just the destination. And I just think that's so profound to think about, an analogy level of this idea that sometimes we have to walk through some real tumultuous stuff, some more turbulent stuff, to go our flying pun, to get to that destination, to get to that place of where you're like, okay, I've kind of walked through some bad stuff, but I've arrived. Why did you feel like you needed to take flight in your own life, and how does that apply?
Well, I come from a very traumatic childhood, even followed me into adulthood. There came a point where I started to realize that if I did not take charge of my story, take charge of myself, really start to heal from things in my past, that I may not be around that long. I'm approaching 40 years old. Came to this realization that I may not make it to 50, maybe a little bit past 50, if I would have kept going on the same trajectory that I was going. That kind of realization that I may not be around unless I actually do something myself. I think when it comes to trauma and healing, the only person that could really do that is the individual themselves. The saying, you can't help somebody, they have to want the help themselves. It's so true. You can't help somebody that can't help themselves.
But let's be honest. I mean, a lot of people have childhood trauma. A lot of people have walked through some horrific things, some nightmarish type things. For you, what was that moment for you like growing up?
Very traumatic. To go back in time a little bit, I was 5 years old when my mother passed away. At the time, I had thought that it was a freak accident, that my mother had a freak accident in our family bathroom. She fell and slipped and something happened. My father picked up the pieces of his life, found another woman he married. That woman also adopted me and my siblings. She became my stepmother. And then 4 years later, my stepmom passes away. Kind of felt like this deja vu. And then the real sucker punch for me was on my 10th birthday, my father was arrested and charged with killing both my mother and my stepmother. I was literally thrown for a loop. I did not see any kinds of violence, abuse, and things like that. Here I was thrust into all this chaos. And then that chaos would literally snowball into multiple things. I grew up in the foster care system where I stayed until I was 18, and then I joined the military. There's things that led up to that. I sat through my father's second murder trial. He was convicted of killing both my mother and my stepmother. I would go on to the military without really figuring out things from my childhood. Glossed over it. I never really dealt with it until I actually joined the military, really on my own in every sense of the word, finally able to process things myself. I was away from outside influences. It probably also helped that I joined the military. I was a military police officer, so I had gone through some kind of formal law enforcement type of training. I started thinking more like a cop. Things just didn't add up from my childhood and what my father had said, because up until this point, 18, 19, 20 years old, and I'm still believing that my father is completely innocent, just a big misunderstanding. Who in their right mind wants to actually believe that their father is capable of doing something like that? My first few years in the military, I had to come to terms with my past. I would get to a certain point and then I would kind of stop. Then it kind of all culminated, got out of the military. At this point, been deployed to both Iraq, Afghanistan, and I get out of the military. I'm 28, 29 years old. Now I have to restart my life. Now it's kind of like, okay, now you want me to be just like everybody else. My entire life has been the furthest thing from normal. My childhood, that's not normal. Going into the military, getting deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, my entire life up to that point was the furthest thing from normal. Didn't know like where I belonged, where I fit in. So I had difficulty with that. Then also the emotional and mental aspect of things as well, trying to process all of that, trying to deal with that, trying to heal from that. That's ultimately what led me to this take flight moment, if you will, being able to do all of that. I've had so many traumas in my life that if I didn't find a way to either deal with it or cope with it or heal from it or move forward, it would lead me to my demise. It would lead me to my death in some way, shape, or form, whether that's by my own hands, taking my own life, toxic, negative things that would ultimately lead to disease and bad health, lead to an early death.
What branch did you serve in?
The Air Force.
I was hoping you were a Marine. All right, we'll let that slide. But you're around planes all the time. That maybe invokes a little more in you with this whole take flight thing. Did you ever get to go up in a plane at all?
Air Force planes?
Yeah.
Not for fun. I flew in cargo planes to and from Afghanistan, rode in a helicopter to
That's not fun.
Now that I think about it, there was one fun part of a training exercise. I rode in on a Black Hawk helicopter and then actually kind of like fast rode down. So that was kind of cool. Other than that, not so much.
You mentioned being in the foster care system after your dad's incarceration and the trial. Did you ever think along the way during that foster care time, where's our family? Where's Uncle Bob or where's Aunt Susie? We're these family that should love me, that should come save me from this turbulent time of foster care, because I've heard people say coming out of foster care wasn't rainbows and sunshine in Hallmark movies.
I did have family that looked after me. Immediately after my father's arrest, I actually lived with my one aunt. I'm still close to her to this day. She's probably the closest thing that I do have as a mother. She has 3 kids of her own. Something happened. Her and her husband, so my uncle, took me and my siblings in. She literally took on so much. It was really affecting her in a negative way. She made a tough choice. She knew that she had to make a change for herself, for her own mental health. At the time, I didn't quite understand that, to go live with my grandparents. I had lived with them before, so it wasn't big of a deal. I was starting to gain some traction in terms of living somewhat of a normal childhood again. It's almost like that rug was ripped out from underneath me again. This was shortly before my father's first murder trial. I'm living at my grandparents' house. There was like some court order or something. My grandparents, they didn't know or weren't aware of some court order that was being drummed up. Because they didn't know about it, they accidentally violated that court order. By default, the courts said that we were no longer allowed to live them. That's what spawned the foster care situation. So we were removed from blood relatives and sent to go live with complete strangers.
That's what I'm wondering about, is the complete stranger aspect. And it's great that you had family there sounds like for a little bit. When you go live with complete strangers, that's not a great time, I'd imagine.
Me and my siblings, we were very, very fortunate. We were also fortunate to take part in the entire situation. We had a lot of say. A lot of it also had to do with, we were older. I was older. I was 12 at the time. My oldest brother, he was 15, 16 at this point. Collectively, we were older. Our caseworker thought deservedly good right to speak for ourselves and what we wanted. Also, at the same time, we were not willing to be split apart. There was a somewhat of a threat that we would be split up. They were having a difficult time finding a home to fit all 3 of us. When you sit back and think about it as an adult, it's an awful tall order to ask one family to take in 3 teenagers literally overnight. That spawned another issue. The judge, why not go public with the story? And so we did. Garnered a lot of media attention. That's how we got the exposure that we needed. My siblings and I, we actually ended up going on home visits, and we actually literally kind of interviewed families. We had a much bigger and larger role in that process than probably 95 to 99% of the people that come through the foster care program.
So what role does forgiveness play in your story?
Forgiveness plays a huge role. There's a point point in my healing journey where I recognized that I needed to let go. Years later, I come to find out that my father had been lying to me for all of these years. He kind of somewhat confesses to killing my mother. I also find out that I'm actually physically present when that is happening. Years later, that at 5 years old, I actually witnessed my father killing my mother. And I heard this from the horse's mouth, from my father's mouth, the best source. I never really processed that either. After I got out of the military, I wasn't in a good place mentally. I felt the need to kind of just let go. Asked myself, what would it be like? What would it look like if I had one final conversation with my father? After I find out that he had been lying to me for years and that I had witnessed my mother's murder, I cut him off and I cut him out of my life. And so it had been years since I had even talked to him. I wanted to send him a letter. I sat back and I wondered, what did I want this letter to represent? And I asked the question over and over again, what if I had one final conversation with him? What would that look like? What do I say? What do I want to say? And what do I want it to represent? First half of the letter, it was anger, and it was anger driven. But I also saw the need to let that go. The second half of the letter, I did what I thought that I never would do. That is, I actually forgave him. I forgave him for literally everything. There's a lot of misconceptions, I feel, when it comes to forgiveness. Also, my father can be very manipulative. Also wanted him to know that just because I'm forgiving him doesn't mean I'm absolving him of anything, doesn't mean what he did was okay. I also felt like I was carrying some of the burdens he actually caused. Quite frankly, burdens that I had no reason to carry. Let him know all of that. I let him know that I didn't want a relationship with him anymore, that this was going to be my last correspondence with him. In the last few lines, I said, you know what, if I see you in the next life after, he passes and after I pass, if I happen to see you there, we can embrace, we can literally start over, start new. If you're not, that's okay too. That's also not up to me. I'm leaving that up to a higher power. Took my power back by writing and penning that letter and sending it to him. I felt just immensely better doing that.
So our next season that will follow you, we're actually calling it Dear as an ellipsis. So ... Who would you write a letter to if you got a chance to? Maybe a past relative, or maybe it's somebody like in your situations. Gosh, this is so good. Like, that's a great, couple of months segue. So anyway.
I do have a link where people could actually get my writing exercise. I have a writing exercise that people can do, actually emulates the very same thing that I did, but there's a few key differences that I learned. I call it the letter burning exercise. You kind of do a lot of the same things that I did. Instead of sending it to the actual person like I did, you burn it.
Writing to your dad, how powerful that letter must be. Do you know if he read it?
At first I didn't, because I used a fake return address on it, and he hasn't responded. I did hear through the grapevine. He also hasn't tried to contact me. When I told him, don't contact me, this is it, he got the point.
How do your siblings feel about him? I know you can't necessarily speak for them or be in their shoes per se, like we're in your shoes right now. I would imagine you guys are pretty tight. You've walked through a very horrific thing.
We're pretty close as we can be. All three of us live in 3 different cities. We all respect each other's journey, if you will. Whenever I told them that speaking out, me doing this journey of writing a book and writing a memoir about my experiences, if they want to come out and speak on their relationship, they can do so. I would respect their point of view. I'll just say that we do share a lot of the same views.
So I've heard the expression, if you have unforgiveness in your heart, it's like drinking poison thinking somehow it affects the other person. Do you agree with that statement, or what are your thoughts on when I say that to you?
I would agree. There's a lot of misconception about forgiveness. And I must have heard this 1,000 times with my story, people hearing about my story, and my story's been on true crime shows, documentaries, and I've seen comments, I could never be able to forgive so-and-so, or if so-and-so did this, I would never be able to forgive. It's just you're not in that position. So you don't know how it feels. Everybody has at one point or another forgiven somebody in their life at one point or another. I would say if somebody says that they hasn't, I would say BS because they're flat out lying. Doesn't matter what it is, you found it in your heart to forgive them. It has to come from a very real place. By forgiving my father, it gave me the courage to be able to take my narrative back and to be able to talk about it in ways that I never did before or that I never could. I wouldn't be on a podcast like this. There's so many things that it can do for you. And so when somebody says that it belongs to them and not the other person, take issue with that. You're not the one who did anything wrong.
Does your dad deserve your forgiveness? I chose the word deserve on purpose.
Does he deserve forgiveness? That's a very good question.
You think on that. I don't like the word deserve. In fact, it's one of the few words that I absolutely hate. I don't like deserve. I need. I should get. No. There are very few things in life that I quote unquote deserve. When I think about forgiveness and I think about your situation, I think about your dad, person of faith here. My faith teaches me that if I'm unwilling to forgive, it says in my Bible, and I think others have found it in theirs as well, God is not willing to forgive me. And that is a struggle I have. There are some people I think in this world that do not deserve my forgiveness. Not to your level. I would have a hard time if my dad actually killed my mother. I would have a hard time if my dad did anything horrific like that. I don't know if he would deserve that forgiveness. But again, my faith pushes on that. Neil, you want that same forgiveness given to you. Why can't he deserve that same forgiveness also? What would your response be?
I would say half and half. Like I'm halfway there of he's not deserving of my forgiveness. And I do believe everybody, no matter what they've done, can be forgiven. And maybe that's another keyword, buzzword is can versus deserve. And I do like how you brought up deserve when you talk about what we deserve in our lives. That's a very interesting word to describe that. I would say I'm half-half. Ultimately, it comes back to what is forgiveness going to do for you? What is going to happen if you don't? Kind of like where I was, where if I don't forgive him, what am I actually doing? Where is that leading me? What am I really doing? Focusing on how it could benefit me. I kind of took my father's deservedness, if that's even a word, may even be making in that one.
I like it. Deservedness. Yeah, it's a word now. We just added it to Webster.
His deservedness out of the equation by keeping it more and solely focused on me and being more selfishly what I would benefit from it and what I would deserve from that. Instead of saying, does my father deserve forgiveness? I'm really saying I deserve forgiveness.
Yeah, I looked up the word deserve. I often do that when I use a word. I think I know what it means. Really think I know what it means. You're not using that the way you think it means. I think that's Princess Bride. I might have messed it up. I always mess that line up. Deserve. Do something or have or show a quality of worth, reward, or punishment. Reference to deserve a pat on the back for his bravery. You've earned it. It's your right. You've claimed it. You've qualified. You're good enough. You're well deserved. You've earned. These are all kind of little things. Fair. That's another word I hate. Fair and deserve. Those are my two words. I'm like, oh, that's not fair. Life isn't fair. Well, I deserve that. No, you don't. And that's not fair that you don't deserve that. Do you have any memories of mom?
I do. They're very faint. My birth mother, she was killed when I was 5. Small, faint memories. And then my stepmom, I still also faint memories. And then on top of that, the events surrounding, it's taken a lot of those good memories one may have. I would say that I probably have more bad memories than good. I still do have good memories of my mother, my stepmother, even us as a family. I do have some memories. They're definitely very faint.
Do you have any good memories of your dad?
That came up whenever I was writing my book. It actually pointed out to me by my writing coach, and she was just like, you give great descriptions about your mother, your stepmother, etc. What about your dad? You don't go really in depth. I really had to sit back and actually think about that. I actually don't have a whole lot of memories with my father. Was he really around? And if he was, then maybe I would have more memories of him. To me, when I think about my father, he was the tall, lerpy, goofy, nerdy goofball. That's who I think about and remember.
Do you love him?
No. I've even said this to multiple people. My father's getting up there in age. He will die in prison. I'll hear through the grapevine when the day comes that he has passed on. My reaction will probably be somewhat cold, nonchalant, probably be something to the effect of, okay, thanks for informing me that happened. And then I'll probably just carry on with the rest of my day. He doesn't affect me. I don't have any emotions really with him at all. Not the anger, not the love, going into the opposite direction. I don't hold anger for him, but I also don't hold any love for him either. When he does pass, it's not really going to affect me. I'm not going to get emotional. Okay. And then carry on with the rest of my day.
So I've heard this from other people that when they've had a traumatic event or maybe a spiritual awakening, they've actually changed their name. Why didn't you do that?
Change my name in terms of...
Change your last name as far as not carrying his name any longer.
I don't know. I think probably because even growing up, even as a teenager, still processing a lot of things, I've also been pretty self-aware for a big portion of my life. In high school, I was self-aware enough to know I had been through so much and I'd been through such tragic circumstances. I also felt that this would all make sense one day. Will I ever be able to answer that? I don't know. I never felt the need to change my name. My name specifically, it actually, at times I've had difficulty with my name. I never really particularly liked the name Todd, if I'm being honest. It also fits with my personality a little bit. I kind of view myself as somebody that stands out. Just like how my quote unquote story stands out, I as a person, as an individual, stand out. And that aspect of it, I do like. It does fit my personality. Case in point, here I am on a podcast and also as a grown man being very vulnerable with the world about some very painful experiences in my life.
Means fox, by the way.
Ah, thank you.
In case you're wondering. I don't even know what to say sometimes in these moments with you. I know we figuratively say a lot of times to folks like, hey, we're in your shoes. That's why we asked the shoe question at the beginning, the size and the brand. It's silly. It's fun. It's a nice little icebreaker. When I started the show, because again, we're doing audio. We don't do the video thing. I know people throw rocks at us for not doing video. We just don't. Stop throwing rocks. We're never going to probably do video. I'm never going to say never. Most likely not. It's too hard to edit. Plus, I want someone to use their imagination when they're hearing things. I think there's power in the spoken word. I don't know if I could forgive him. I think you're a stronger man than I am. I don't know if I could.
I think in order to understand that aspect of it, this also goes hand in hand with other people's shoes. Perhaps to understand that, you have to walk in somebody else's pain. To understand how somebody can forgive, maybe somebody needs to walk in that person's pain, what they're feeling, their burdens, what they need to overcome for themselves to be able to live. And it's so ironic that I'm going to bring up this comparison. Both of my mothers were killed around water, my mother in a bathtub, my stepmother in a hot tub. Let's consider the comparison of drowning. When somebody is actively drowning, the only thing that you are thinking about is what? Getting air. Getting air, trying to breathe. Imagine pain, your suffering, your sadness, depression, anxiety, all of that stuff crushing you to the point where you feel like you can't breathe. If you're not willing to breathe and you're drowning, you would be willing to do anything just to get that breath of air. With that comparison, if you can't imagine forgiving someone for doing that, to understand how someone can forgive somebody for doing that, perhaps think of it as your last gasp of air. If you had a choice of either drowning in a pool or forgiving your worst enemy, which would you choose?
I think I have to say forgiving them. I don't want to. And I'm sure there's been moments where you didn't want to either. I'd imagine.
I didn't think that I was going to do that. I recognized what I needed to do in order for me to move to the next step. I was self-aware, going back to that self-awareness. I was self-aware enough to know that this is a very great first step for me. Once I was able to do that, I was able to also unpack other things as well.
So if we could somehow get into a DeLorean, I know DeLoreans are a thing. If they really could time travel and I could take you back to 4 years old, what would you say to that 4-year-old you?
You're in for some turbulent times. It's not your fault. You are loved. You are seen. You will be okay. You are safe.
What would you say to your mom?
That I love her? I don't know. Other than that, I don't know.
I imagine just in your mind, if you, again, I don't know if you're a person of faith or not. I'm not necessarily asking that, and you don't necessarily have to share that if you don't feel comfortable sharing that. Being that I am, there have been people that have passed that I am so near and dear to that I wish I could have just a weekend with. Just 10 minutes with, 15 minutes, maybe an hour, selfishly. I want an hour back. And an hour doesn't even seem like enough time. That's why I say a weekend, because I feel like that's enough time. But I just wonder, that little boy, that little 4-year-old little boy, and I know you were 5 when she passed. I'm going back at least a year to give you more of a context. That 4-year-old little boy spending the weekend with mom, what that would be like if you got that moment. And man, I want everything as a human to human right now in this moment to give you that somehow. God, give me the power of Bruce Almighty just for a moment to let my friend Todd go back in time and have that moment, have that weekend with mom again. If there ever is a reunion day with your mom, have you ever thought about or let your imagination take you there to tell her more?
More than take me there. This is actually a culmination point in my memoir. During my deployment to Afghanistan, I actually had a situation where I thought that I was in a situation I could die. I had this out-of-body experience. I actually came face to face with my mother and stepmother. Just a very beautiful experience. I actually credit that kind of out-of-body experience also to where I'm at today. I credit that to being able to forgive my father as well. I credit that to giving me the courage to heal myself, to go down that path as well. It was a very spiritual experience that it really did reshape, and changed my life as a whole. It changed my life probably in more ways than I ever thought possible. And to give you an idea, after my Afghanistan deployment, I knew right then and there that I wanted to get out of the military. Done. And to give some context, I was living this alpha male, bravado-filled life with guns. I had a very prestigious position. I did presidential security. I worked in the Air Force One hangar. I'm around 3-star generals and higher, president's cabinet, all of these things, Secret Service agents. I've attended tactical training schools, all this stuff. Think about like the video game Call of Duty. Pretty much everything in that video game I've either done, trained for, or know an awful lot about. I lived that life, what I call alpha male bravado-filled life, and I just plain and simply just didn't want it anymore. It changed me in so many ways. That was the driving force of me getting out of the military, reshaped some of my spiritual beliefs and even some of my religious beliefs. It's definitely an experience that has changed me on multiple levels in many different ways.
I think it's cool you got that moment, though. People might want to throw rocks at it. I would stand in the way of that.
Yeah, and for a super long time, I never told anybody of it. I know the stigma that comes from it. Yeah, I saw both my mom and stepmom, both have been dead for many years. What that sounds like. I was so afraid to even share that. Now, and going back to forgiveness, that has shaped me. Forgiving myself and then giving myself the courage to be able to share something like that. To be able to share that I had this very beautiful spiritual experience reshaped me and my life, I think is very powerful. One of the words that you hate, it deserves to be shared.
You can use it. It's fine. I'm okay. It's when people use it in the context of like, well, I deserve to have my way. No, you don't. Come on, man. Well, that's not fair. Come on. Well, Todd, you mentioned the memoir. We've kind of alluded to it. We've kind of circled around it. We've done a lot of flybys over it. I'm running out of airplane puns. It's in the seat back. There it is. But where can folks go to, one, hear about more of your story? I'm sure there's so much more we could get to, so much more we could dive into, because we could probably go even longer. Where can folks go to grab a copy, learn more about you, and maybe more to the story?
People can go to my website, Todd, Todd, Boz, BOZ.com. It'll take you to a page, and actually right now it's getting on the waiting list, and I will be providing updates on how somebody can get more information. All the details will be there.
Well, we're going to do one thing too. When it officially hits the bookstores of the world, that being Amazon, that seems to be the biggest bookstore in the world, seems like, we're going to actually feature it on our page called Books That I Love, up towards the top. Don't worry, it won't be towards the tippy top, but up there. 3 books we save for the very best. And it's only because I'm a huge North Carolina fan. So everyone kind of goes below that. Yours will be on there, and we'd love to feature you on there. And I hope you're okay with us doing that.
I used to live in North Carolina. That's where my mother was killed in. So I don't know if it makes it bump it up the list a little bit. I'm just saying.
That makes me feel bad. Where are you guys living at in North Carolina?
Greensboro.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm a big University of North Carolina fan. Chapel Hill is, in my mind, it's Bethlehem in Chapel Hill. So Greensboro is pretty good too, though. They have a nice arena. We've used it a few times when we were playing basketball. I say we, the University of North Carolina. Well, Todd, we've had, I feel like, some very serious, intense stuff. And I just want to acknowledge what you shared. I want to acknowledge your heart. I want to acknowledge your transparency. And again, I want to just affirm your ability to forgive. I don't think there's a lot of folks that could do that. So I want to say thank you for that, truly.
Thanks again for having me on and sharing my story. Perhaps a lot more of you can listen to my story and take it upon yourself. Look deep in yourself, who in your life you can forgive. You can come to a place that you can do that.
I think that's solid advice. So before we let you go, we like to do some silliness. Now, again, we've had some very intense stuff. I think it's only fitting to have maybe some silliness, some levity. So here we are. We're in season 16. As I mentioned, we have new questions. We're really excited about these questions. They're airplane questions. They're flight-themed questions. As I said, I'm a big North Carolina fan, so I have a cup here which has a die in it, which makes it random. That's why we have the die in the cup. Makes sense. It's kind of like Yahtzee, but not as cool. We do these 6 random questions, so you don't have to answer all 6. Don't worry. That's where the die comes in. It kind of picks your fate, if you will. And you got number 5. There's proof.
All right.
It's a light blue 5, if you noticed. All right. So Here you go. You are in first class. Have you ever flown first class, by the way? Just a side note.
I have.
Okay.
I have.
So you've been in first class. That's even better. That makes this question even more exciting. So you find yourself in first class, and sitting next to you, now again, it can be in the aisle, it can be the window seat. I don't know how you want to look at this. Right next to you is someone famous. Who would you want it to be?
Eminem.
Okay.
The rapper, Eminem.
Would you lose yourself in the moment?
Yes, I would. I would lose myself in the moment.
Would you see if he has mom's spaghetti on his sleeve?
No, but I definitely want to try out his restaurant. I don't know if you've ever
I didn't even know that he had a restaurant. Whoa, tell me more.
A restaurant, and it's called Mom's Spaghetti, and it's in Detroit.
That's hilarious.
I saw a few years back, LA hosted the Super Bowl. He was invited. Yeah, it was.
He was doing halftime. Yeah, he did the halftime show with Snoop and Dre.
He performed at the halftime. He actually brought a shack of his mom's spaghetti to the Super Bowl. And I only know because my brother went to the Super Bowl. He sent me a picture of it.
So are you a big Eminem fan then?
Are
you a closet Eminem fan?
I'm a huge Eminem fan.
So what would you ask Eminem in that moment? Marshall Mathers.
What really drives him? I think that's a very powerful question.
Yeah.
He has all of this fame, success, money, inducted into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What drives you now? That is a very powerful, I would want to know for myself. How do these super successful people find the drive when they're already at the top?
So according to celebritynetworth.com, he's worth $250 million. Todd, thank you so much for what you shared. Well, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, what do you think of that? I am still having a hard time processing, and maybe you are too. We've talked forgiveness 1,000 times, I feel like, on this show. It's no secret. We love to talk about it. What do you do in that moment, though? If Todd can find the strength and the encouragement and the fortitude and the ability to do it, why can't you? We had on a while back this gal, Hannah, Tennessee area. Sometimes you have to do the hard things in life. That would be a hard thing. So today I ask you, what is your hard thing to do? What is your forgivable moment that you can go after? Let me know know. I'd love to know. opspodcast.com is a great place to let me know. There's a connections page there. It's fun to use. You can also leave a voicemail. That's even more fun. You can also let us know on the socials if you're into that. OPS Podcast Show under Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. And before we go, do not forget this. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we once again take flight. When we walk in other people's shoes.